This episode is supported by Thrivable. Thrivable's mission is to create a better future together. They achieve this by making it easy for healthcare companies to include the patient's voice in their decisions so they can create transformative treatments and products for you. And for listeners of Diabetics Doing Things, Thrivable has multiple opportunities for you to earn money for sharing your story, your insights, and your lived experience for companies who produce and design products for people with diabetes. You can participate in online surveys and earn up to $75 per hour and join in-person studies to earn up to $800 per study. To sign up, just go to thrivable.app/Rob and create a profile. It only takes a few minutes. Then just wait for study invitations, participate in a paid diabetes research study, and get compensated for your time. We're always excited to provide people with diabetes opportunities to earn from their lived experience, and this is a great opportunity for you to get paid for your diabetes insights. Sign up today at thrivable.app/Rob. That's Thrivable, thrivable.app/ROB. You can also check them out on Instagram at GoThrivable. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
Welcome back to Diabetics Doing Things. And today we're telling the stories.
Wait. You got to do the intro
Always
better
wait.
than that. You got to do the
Yeah,
intro
just
better than that.
out now. Wait. Sorry. Welcome back to Diabetics Doing Things, where we're telling the amazing stories of people living with diabetes all over the world. And today our guest comes to us from a place very far away, somewhere in the world. Santiago Paulos, my good friend, my amazing coworker sometimes. I'm so excited to have you. Bienvenido a Diabéticos Haciendo las Cosas.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Rob and Eritrea. Pleasure to be here.
And we're excited to have you. Go ahead, Rob. Now you can be the host.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it's a pleasure to have you, but also, the key word that I always want to focus on when we have international guests is from all over the world. And I think navigating even just the time zones and booking, many of our international guests have encountered those challenges. And so thank you for making the time for us this morning, our time, but obviously in the early evening for you.
Cheers. Yeah.
Dark in Edinburgh. And so because I want to be a little spicy,
Okay.
usually we start these interviews with how did the person get diagnosed with diabetes? But I want to skip over diabetes for just a second so we can do our favorite things and speak Spanish. But I want to talk about when me and Santiago met. So I don't know if you remember, Santiago. Do you remember how we met? If you remember, you tell them.
Well, my memory is not my best. It's not my forte. Let's put it that way. I mean, it was definitely in Abu Dhabi, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So
Right.
it already started off sounding like a spy movie. But so we met at ISPAD, which is a diabetes conference that takes place in sometimes I think it's like an Arab country
Yeah.
because it's a pediatric endocrinology conference. And that specific year it took place in Abu Dhabi. And I went with DDoc. Shout out to DDoc for having me and the people over there. And I sat at a table where Santiago was. And I think that sometimes when I'm talking really fast, I'll drop a word in Spanish here and there, just like throw some salsa onto my tacos and conversation. And I can't remember what it was I said that Santiago turns to me. He's like, in his very cute little Uruguay accent. Tú hablas español. But he just said it so cavalierly. And I was like, sí, yo hablo español y qué? Kind of stuff. And he was like, oh, tú eres mexicana. And he's like, you're a Mexican. And that was the first time I think me and Santiago really interacted.
Now I do remember, and you're right. I think I was quite confused because you jumped quite quickly to, a very like an American accent to a very Mexican accent. And then you were speaking Arabic as well. So, yeah. But yeah, correct. That was when we met. And this was 2 years ago.
2022. Yeah, time flies.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
September of 22. And now we've done so many things together, and we're going to talk about that during the episode because it's kind of why we're here.
True.
But yeah.
Exciting. Yeah.
All right, so we all been very polite. So as far for we not all of us get to be a global citizen like Eritrea and be able to kind of switch in and out languages, but I think it's one of those things where as I think about family planning on my side is like, oh, okay, that'd be a really nice thing for someone to be able to speak Spanish, to speak Arabic, to speak some of the other Romance languages, because it basically gives you not just a passport, but it gives you a way to connect with people cross-culturally, like in different places, and you can uncover conversations and relationships like this one where if she doesn't speak Spanish or and you don't hear that, maybe we don't even have this conversation today. So I think it's really interesting, like when you're thinking about global citizenship and like the world is shrinking and digital, we were talking, Santiago and I, before the recording, like we've followed each other and seen each other's work for years, but we've never met in person. And so,
Mhm.
it really does kind of give you that lens. And so I think that's really exciting. And again, that's one of my sort of never ending to do items, is to polish up my foreign languages. So it gives you, the ability to move in and out in different places much easier. But for the podcast, Santiago, why don't you tell us about your diagnosis story and tell us how you became, and then we're going to kind of get into your story as the diabetic survivor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed 26 years ago. This was 1997. At that time, I was living in Uruguay, where I was born, actually. And I remember that actually I was in a road trip with my parents, my sister, and a friend of mine. And as I said, I was living in Uruguay, but we went to Argentina, which is next to Uruguay. And we went to the south. So this was the first time I saw snow in my life, actually. And at the time, I think I already had the symptoms, but I was in my teenage years, so it was kind of confusing, those years I always a bit chaotic anyways. And, but I remember vividly that I was inside the car, and in a moment in the middle of the road, I say, "Hey, please stop. I need to eat snow." I was super thirsty. I just went straight to the snow and I started eating snow. Of course, I was peeing everywhere. Usually it's the case. And anyways, long story short, what happens is that we went back from holidays to Uruguay, and a relative of mine said, "Hey, you should go to the hospital. Maybe they will do like a test to you, like a blood sample. They will ask for a blood sample to you." And at that time, this was a tiny town in Uruguay. The blood sample result will take a month. Results to come back to you. And what happened was that actually at that time I was almost 15 years old. I used to have a scooter, so I was riding around the town in the scooter. I had an accident, and I had like a bad crash with a van, I think it was. And I remember that all the accident was happening, the police, and they were trying to find my parents. They couldn't find my parents because my parents were not at home, because they just had received the call from the hospital saying, "You should take Santiago to the hospital immediately because he has super high blood sugar levels." So what happened is that I went to the hospital because of the crash, and then I was notified that I had diabetes. So I stayed longer in the hospital to understand how to inject insulin and all the stuff that you both know very well. So yeah, I would say in that sense, it's kind of a funny story now after many years, but it might be not the usual diagnosed story.
Hey, in the US, we call it like a 2-for-1. You had a 2-for-1 hospital admission, got in for the scooter accident, got to stay for the diabetes.
Yes. And, actually, years after, I thought that, maybe the crash was related with my blood sugar levels, because as you know, I was completely out of control. My reactions were probably slow, or maybe I was having a hypo. I had no idea. So yeah, that's my diagnosis story.
I always remember the crash. I've heard the story a bunch of times because we've met at other conferences. Santiago and I have hung out a lot. And so I hear the story and I always remember the scooter crash. And I just think like it's so Latino American parents to be like, kid is sick, still riding around on a scooter in the town, like a motorized vehicle. It's just very funny. Maybe any parent, I don't know, but it just really reminds me of like, he'll be fine. It's fine. Like it's
That I want to talk about
by
that
the
too,
way,
because
oh, sorry.
no, go
By the
ahead.
way, I was not wearing a helmet. So.
yeah, I didn't expect
That was the problem.
I think too, like you mentioned something like it took a month to get the results back from the health system. So like in that amount of time, like you go through the tests and then you're sort of playing the waiting game. And I immediately thought that too when you were talking about your accident. I was like, oh, I wonder if whether it was hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia related incident. We don't know, right? But knowing what we know about the symptoms now, it's possible.
Probably. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm also just lucky because I just think that you're exactly where you're supposed to be all the time. Like you're really leaning into that this year, and you needed to go to the doctor, man. And so God took you there. And that's where you went. No, but I'm glad it worked out more than anything. Nobody expects to get diabetes, but I am grateful that you do have it because it's cool. Getting to know you has been really, really cool for me. But I want to keep going, not get too sentimental. Rob, you mentioned that you were going to get into how Santiago became the diabetic survivor. So I knew about Santiago and who he was, but I didn't know what the man looked like, because the diabetic survivor was like this diabetes page that had like graphic design. It had these really funny, like very meme oriented diabetes jokes.
Well,
All
and
of the
you'll
pictures,
also see on the episode, the artwork for the episode, the photo submission, Santiago's face is animated.
yeah, always. Or like he's holding a towel over him, like himself, but then he'll like point and be like, "These are not my feet." So like, I guess what I want to understand is how did this get started? Santiago, ¿cómo empezaste este rollo?
¿Cómo empecé? Well, as everything in my life is quite random, actually. So I think, in a way, I'm a bit shy, so that might be part of it, to be honest. And I know this might sound bad, but I'm kind of skeptical about social media and many things. So I think I wanted to create something that will remove myself in a way in terms of just my image, might be kind of my alter ego, something like that. But sometimes I like to think about it as, Daft Punk, for example, no, like the music band, no, that they use the helmets. So you focus more in the music, or maybe in the show itself, but not in how they look like the face. And I do appreciate many, well, as you, Eritrea, well, Rob as well, you use your image, like there's many influencers that they're showing and sharing their experiences. But in my case, I really wanted to remove myself from there, and also maybe create a space where everybody could be potentially. At the end, I think that never happened. But it's this idea actually of putting like a filter between me as an image and how to communicate. And maybe also help to have more like a laugh, or I wanted this cartoony feeling to it as well. So I have not reflected very much about this. It just happened to be.
That's okay.
But I think
I mean,
that there's some clues there. Yeah, for sure.
maybe you're shy, but I think it's great that you use an alter ego for good. We all know I'd be Megamind in this bitch. I would be so evil. I'd be an alter ego. I'd be a villain. A super one at that. But it's interesting. It's still like, so I did some stalking of you, of course, because like I do to everyone, and I noticed that you were like
Go on.
an artist, like with not like a real artist. Know what I mean? Like you've always been an artist, but I found like real canvas, like art, like paintings and like collages and like all this intense Santiago Paulos
I,
artwork from like 2014 and 15 and 16. And I was like, wow, like, is this part of the diabetic survivor inspiration? Because that's when you kind of started the diabetic survivor around the same time.
are you sure you typed down well my name? Sure,
Your picture shows up in the gallery.
Yeah, I think so. My background is in design. My BA was in what was known graphic design at that time, and then I did a master's in contemporary art, specifically in painting, actually in contemporary painting, and that was the reason why I came to Scotland, where I live now. And going back to the previous question, I think that because of that background, where when you're an artist, you are all the time, you have to do whatever you're doing, plus you have to work a lot with your own image, because you have to promote yourself, you have to, as any freelancer, I guess, I think also I wanted to move away from that, because I think I didn't want to, I don't know, to feed my ego, if that makes sense. I wanted to stay away a little bit of that.
But you had mentioned something earlier, and sorry to cut you off there, but like you had mentioned something earlier about like some of the downsides of social media as well, like giving too much access to you as a person, and I'm sort of paraphrasing there, but like creating a separation between the art and the community and like the vibes from your own personal self, from your space. And I think like, to me, I always am fascinated when I talk to designers, because they design their life as well, and they're very intentional, even outside, like the way they put their furniture or whatever the case may be. It's like your education and your persona, and like so much of your life is designed. And I think like it's really interesting to see how that makes its way into like different media.
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right. Yeah, I will say that there's like an unconscious curation of things, because it's just the way that you were trained how you see life, is the lens that you have. Yeah, so that was part of my life. It's not something I do anymore, to be honest, but for many years I was quite into painting, and that was what I did. And I used to go to art fairs, and I used to teach as well, to be like a guest tutor in some institutions, and that was my full-time thing. It was later on that I kind of aligned this idea of making images and diabetes. That is something, of course, that I live with. And that will be probably diabetic survivor, the consequence. And I mean, so yeah, thank you for being a stalker, Eritrea.
Yeah, I think Eritrea's internet sleuthing is always interesting. I
I was
think
just
too, like,
blown away. Like, I always knew you were so talented, but then I was like, I saw some of the paintings, and maybe I was just like in a very like crybaby phase that week. I don't know. But I like cheered up at some. So I was like, these are so good. My friend is so talented. And I just think more people should see them. I don't know.
That was when I was young. No, it's not that anymore.
I think though, like, let shifting back to that, like sharing the experience through the visuals, and coming through and expressing your own diabetes experience or diabetes perspective through art, through visuals. When did that become an outlet for you? Like, I know, like, creating the persona of the diabetic survivor allows you to maintain that space, but like, how did you? I think I'll back up a little bit as well. I think many projects in the diabetes community, like this one, like Diabetics Doing Things. Some people do podcasts. Some people like to write. Some people design. They make T-shirts and whatnot. Maybe
Yeah.
videos or content. Like, how did you start to share your perspective through your art, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually, because I know when was exactly the moment. So at that moment, we were living in London, and I went to an exhibition that was called "How Graphic Design Can Save Your Life," or something like that. In a collection that is called the Welcome Collection. It's a very interesting collection in London that usually has exhibitions about medicine, design, and art, and the connectivity between those three elements. And I mean, this was a big show, but I remember that one had like different sections, and one of them was provocation, how to provoke things through design. And I quite relate with that. And I think that was, when you see there's something, suddenly you are exposed to something, could be a film, could be a song, could be a painting. And I can trace back that something changed in that exhibition. Suddenly I clicked, And I would say that after that, I started to do some doodlings about diabetes. But actually the idea of creating, let's say, the Instagram account was a bit through my partner. So she saw the drawings I was doing, and she said to me, "Hey, you could do something about it." And that's when I opened the Instagram account. And then from there, everything was quite organic, actually. People started to reaching out. You start, maybe it happens to you with Diabetic Doing Things, that you get these amazing messages. People saying, "Oh, wow, maybe you don't realize, but what you have done, this really touched me," or "I have been there," or start getting messages of moms in hospital with, like, "My child has been recently diagnosed. You made my day," And I was kind of in shock there, because of course I never thought about that. And also you have to suddenly to go through all these feelings that you had never experienced before. Wow, I have been helping somebody, like this, something that to me was, I don't know, not so important, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think that from there things started to shape in the place that they are now, but it was super organic, and always like a back and forth between the people and the channel. So my point here is that was not like a conscious decision or like a plan of how to do it. No, so it was very, spontaneous in a way.
I relate very much to all of what you just shared, because I think, at the beginning of the podcast, we started this to do 10 episodes. And if any positive feedback came through, like, I was going to continue to do it. That was kind of my goal or bet with myself. And yeah, I think, we talked about some of the downsides of social media earlier, but like, one of the positives is that these things can be discovered by people who are looking for connection, or looking for inspiration or, just can attach themselves to a similar relatable feeling. I think that's even with some of the podcast clips that we share, the ones that, the most people see and the most people, engage with are ones of just real lived experience and real emotions about living life with diabetes or encountering challenges or,
Right.
things like what low snacks do you keep around, or, sharing stories about people going to, the gym and having to take themselves out of a class and, treat their hypoglycemia or whatever the case may be. There's an overwhelmingly positive community aspect to that, because I think what most people want is to just feel seen. And, people feel seen in different ways, whether it's, podcasts or people, influencers, like you mentioned, or creators, or in art, or in design, or even just in writing. And I think that's what's so exciting, I think, about living today, where the world, like we talked about earlier, is smaller, is shrunken. You can sort by diabetes, and you can filter by art, and you can filter by, video.
Yeah. And it has grown so much, like in the last 5 years, I would say. It's unbelievable. So it's super, in that sense, social media is great, as you said before. I mean, the sense of community. I would say that before doing all this, I think I had met people with diabetes in my life, but maybe 2 or 3. And now, well, I even know Eritrea, so you can imagine.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
everyone.
I think isn't it interesting how, like, you were at a conference separate from, you weren't intending to discover this, like you said, it just clicked. You heard people talking about, medicine, talking about art, talking about design, and the intersection there. And then you say, oh, that's me. Like, I want to contribute to that. And now you have, friends globally where, you're able to connect with people from all over the world with diabetes just because you opted in to do that. I think that's something that when I talk about, not everybody's dream looks the same. Not everybody's contribution looks the same. Everybody's different, but being able to opt into your own version of whatever that looks like, whether it's advocacy, whether it's awareness, whether it's art, or whatever your contribution is, just do it, because you never know what'll come back with you to you. You may end
Absolutely.
up even being friends with someone crazy like Eritrea. So, I mean, like,
Oh,
all those things.
I mean, yes, but also like I think it's so interesting because so many of our stories are so similar. Like, and what Santiago said about how like you can go through an experience and it kind of changes you forever. It might change the trajectory of your life forever. It's so my vibe. It's so what happened to me when I met Rob Howe. Like, it's just also like it just happens to creators, I think, is where you stand in a certain place and you're either influenced by someone. Look at that. You're an influencer, Rob. Or you get it from a conference, but something changes your trajectory. And that's just such a I don't know, it's just such a human thing. And it's interesting to see other people be in their diabetes career because not only is Santiago my friend, but before he was my friend, he was already like world renowned. Like he's worked with the IEF and all these other diabetes like nonprofits to make graphic art. So you heard that one thing at that conference, and then you were like, "Okay, let's turn it into a career." Like, how
Yeah,
did we?
I want to talk about that for sure, because, like, I think I got introduced to you for the first time through the Insulin for All t-shirt. Like, your
Wow.
design, your Insulin for All design is the main Insulin for All t-shirt. So, like, take us through like starting to do your, like you said, talking to your partner about doodling diabetes things and sharing them. And then fast forward to, there are people in every continent wearing your design on their t-shirt.
Yeah, well, thank you for touching on that project, because actually I would say it's like the most, like the best projects that I have ever made in terms of the impact. No, and I mean, of course, I do align with all that campaign. Just to back up what I said before, the reality is that I just got a message from Elizabeth, the founder of T1 International, so the NGO behind the Insulin for All campaign. And she reached to me and said, "Hey, would you like to collaborate with us? Can you help us? I like what you do, and can you create, like some assets for us?" And that was literally like the first thing I did in the diabetes community online. That is something that still goes till now. And well, I just decided to apply the design in different merch products, which I sell in my shop and things like that. That of course there's no profit behind it. It's just the idea to to bring diabetes awareness, no? So a few things actually happened that way, completely. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it is like a casualty thing. I don't know in English the word, but it's just something that just happened, no? So and as you said before, like the idea of seeing something that you have done in different parts of the world, that's quite a nice thing to do, especially if it is for a good cause. No? So I would say that was actually the first project. Indeed, was the first one. Then I did one for a summer camp in the States, which is called Chinook, I think. Maybe you know it.
Oh yeah, I
Chinook
have heard of it.
could be, which
Yes.
was quite nice. They were doing like a new, I think it was like a new room to treat the hypos. So they wanted like some artworks for the wall. So it was quite nice to explore that side. It was more like what we can do with the resources that we have, just hanging things or in walls or these sort of things. And then what happened as well, that some people from the industry started to contact me. I remember like the first one actually was Ever Since, that they were looking to do some things for their social media. And that experience that actually was the first one was super interesting because it was the first time that they was like working with a marketing team. I think they were in New York. And then is where you get, you know, I have seen a little bit of the third sector or the NGOs, how they talk about diabetes and how, you know, how things are moving forward. But suddenly you're in a completely different framework where you're talking about, it's a business, no? So they're talking about objectives, like the vision of a company, that of course they're trying to help people with diabetes, but there's a profit behind. And I found quite enriching this, and I really appreciate that they could have seen both sides. And also because I do have diabetes, so, you know, you're trying all the time to make the most of it, no? And try to create something that is really, that works for everybody. So, I mean, something I think important in my profession or my professional career is that I work for a few years for Diabetes UK, which is like the NGO, like the biggest NGO here in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really eye-opening, you know, to work like in an institution of more than 300 people that, I mean, they do research. They have, you know, sections there about policy making, having an impact in society, and suddenly being like a little gear in a massive structure, no? And how we can work together to make things happen. So yeah, I think, I mean, there's many other projects. Well, one of them, of course, I have worked with Tribe, with Diabetes Mind. I have worked with Medtronic more on the commercial side of things.
D-Doc, your
D-Doc,
favorite.
of course. So then I have a more, you know, I have some interest about like technology. So I have worked with some diabetes apps and these sort of things. I'm afraid some of them, they were startups and they never made it. But that brings me to what I do, my full-time job, which is in a healthcare company here in Scotland, that we do have like a diabetes app that works locally here. Let's say, I mean, to sum up, I mean, I do things related with branding, identity, and communication, but then there are things that are more related with interfaces and user journey and all that stuff. But something that I find super useful about trying to connect the community to the commercial side of things, or I don't know if commercial is the word, but let's say they're really developing a product, is that, for example, recently I was in San Francisco in this Diatribe workshop that was around diabetes stigma. And suddenly you take some elements there that could inform maybe the wording or the messaging that you're trying to apply in an app, no? So everything connects at the end. And I'm a big believer that we need to change things from the inside. So I think that working in the industry and having diabetes is a good match, at least for me. Of course, there's a risk that you can, you know, burn out because it's all day is about diabetes. And sometimes it's too much, but I think, I don't know, you can relate with that too.
Oh man, we talk about it a lot with creators, and because you're right, you live with diabetes, you're creating content about diabetes, and you're working in diabetes. It's just, it can be overwhelming. And we know about, like you said, internally, we understand in the community how burnout manifests itself, and it can be really challenging.
Something we don't talk about ever, this isn't in the questions. This is me leaning in and maybe interrupting. But because I've never thought about this before, really, but we work in diabetes, we have diabetes, and then we have to have these conversations with people who don't have diabetes in the professional space. And sometimes those conversations are like awful. Like they're about complications, which is like one of the worst things that I hate talking about it. Or like it's about mortality rates or giving birth or stuff like that. Like I don't think we ever think about that additional layer of like catastrophicism of diabetes that we just kind of have to like casually navigate through it as other people put their stigma and conversations around us, even in a space where it's like healthcare, because that still happens all the time. Does that happen to you? Or is it just me, Santiago?
Oof, that's a tricky one. I mean, of course that happened to me. I mean, I will reframe the thing. For example, something that is happening to me, or had happened to me before, is that, being in places where everybody has diabetes, and we're trying to do a work around diabetes, and suddenly there's somebody that has no diabetes. And which is super important, should be people in the teams. It's not like a company about diabetes. All people there should, be working there should have diabetes. That makes no sense to me. Because we
Yeah.
really, should be like a diverse, workforce or whatever you want. And also
Yeah, scout
diabetes,
partners with different experiences. Yeah, I got you.
because if not, it's like we are seeing the big picture. Also, diabetes to me is a lot about parent. It's about healthcare professionals. Diabetes is like something that impacts the whole society. So we really need those voices as well. So we need to be careful. When I jump into with my advocacy hat, it's this thing, even if there's somebody that has no diabetes, it's like, what are you doing here? No? But I think it's that people are important as well.
Well, I
No,
think there's so much that goes into diabetes other than your own personal management, like interpersonal
Yeah.
relationships, like your,
Exactly.
like you said, friends, family, coworkers, and all of those things. Like I think we're something we think about a lot when related to stigma. And I want to stay on this for a second. Is like
Mhm.
most people who don't have diabetes have no interaction with diabetes content. Maybe they see like a high level statistic, maybe from like the WHO or from the American Diabetes Association here in the US, where it's like, 1 in 3 people are living with some sort of, diabetes. And I saw one today, it was like 90% of people with pre-diabetes don't know that they have it. And so like they're seeing these high level statistics, or they're seeing something related to stigma. So it's like a comedian making a diabetes joke, or
Yeah.
it's an out of date fact, or like something from, an ad from 20, 30 years ago. And that unfortunately is reinforcing these negative stereotypes and stigmas for people who don't know otherwise. So I guess for you, when you are thinking of how to educate people on stigma, or how to uh, advocate for people with diabetes through your art and design related to stigma, like how do you approach those things?
Um, yeah. I'm just thinking about this. Let me think about this, because, something about social media or any of the digital news that we are consuming nowadays is that actually we just see the same and again, because we are in this kind of a vacuum now of whoever we are connected. So you're completely right in terms of that. I don't know if a person that is, you will not get any information about diabetes if you don't have diabetes. I completely agree with that. And if not, you will get these like high numbers or whatever that are more like report or things. So I think, trying to think about what I do in Instagram in particular. So when I'm not working with when I'm doing things for myself, I'm afraid I do many things that are only understood internally. So they're only understood by the community. And that could be kind of fun for us, but actually will have no impact for somebody that has no diabetes. But when I try to touch things in different level, let's put an example. When we do create things in a visual way, or we do like some messaging or whatever, first it will have like a shallow reading level that everybody will understand, but you could feed different layers of information. So things that are more subtle, let's say I do a joke, every time you can understand it because you have diabetes, but then has like a sub layer that could be understood by, I don't know, a mother with a child with diabetes, and so on. So I think that's something that sometimes I try to do consciously. but specifically about stigma. To be honest, Rob, I find it quite difficult. I mean, I try to do my best, but sometimes I realize that sometimes I might be reinforcing stigma sometimes. I know it sounds terrible, but, it's all the time trying to check yourself from where you're creating things, because of course we are all biased and, or certain things. Well, something quite eye-opening when we met in ISPAD with Eritrea was, I mainly have explored the Western world. So I realized, especially, about stigma, that is a good example, that some things that I thought that applied to me and I was quite open-minded and so on, maybe only applies to the Western world, but maybe not to other cultures. So I think that there's an element of that being conscious that we're creating objects, we're creating comms, we're creating images, mainly for the Western world, no? And that's something to bear in mind as well. But sorry, I'm just thinking out of the blue, but that's just something that maybe something that we to think more about it probably.
I'm glad you brought this up, actually, because we had a similar discovery, not necessarily geographically last year, but many of the people. So we started our partnership with North Texas Food Bank in 2022, which we're working to reach food insecure people with diabetes. So people who are living on a fixed income or on Medicare, Medicaid here in the United States. And what we discovered is like most of those people are over the age of 50, and sometimes like a high percentage of those are over the age of 65. And we don't make a ton of content for people who are 65 plus. And yet there's still a lot of people out there who are looking for the same things that we're looking for, just in a different format or a different media. So instead of virtual meetups, they want to do in-person meetups. Instead of an internet or a digital experience, they want a print experience. And so that was something for us that, like you said, you have to be careful not to be too hard on yourself, because we're small and we don't have unlimited resources. So we can't reach everybody exactly where they are. But it is really interesting to think about the differences in Western world versus Eastern world, or developing nations.
Yeah.
And old versus young.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you touched on something quite important, that is digital literacy, and which is a massive problem. Actually, recently there was an article in The Guardian here in the UK where it was about diabetes care and how the NHS, which is like the health system here, was giving sensors, freestyle libre sensors to the population, but because many people, they don't have a smartphone, they were not having the impact that they should have, no? So, talking about the stigma, I don't know, maybe I do a joke about, closed loop system, but the reality is that how many people do have closed system?
Although it is exciting, because NHS just approved closed loop systems in the UK.
In England in particular.
In England, right?
Yeah, that's super exciting, actually. Super, super ahead of time. So yeah, going back to what you said, I think sometimes it's very difficult also being conscious about the stigma without stigmatizing something else as well. So it's difficult not to fall into that section. But I would say that the most important thing is just to be up to date with what is the last conversation, for example, in terms of language, in terms of different realities. It's just a process, so what is right now will not be right probably in a few years. And also being conscious about the resources and the audience that you have, because you have to speak to the people that are close to you as well, without forgetting of other. But yeah,
I think conscious is the right word. Like, just being aware and understanding, context, and the people that you're able to reach now versus the people that we want to reach, and like you said, being aware of the latest conversation that you've had, and how everyone experiences that differently. I do want to touch, because I think it's always interesting for most of our audience is US based. So when we encounter guests who were diagnosed in other countries or have lived in various different countries, this is always, I think, really interesting. Do you remember a time in your life where you encountered diabetes stigma or stigma around your diabetes, whether, that was like injecting or dosing insulin in public, or fielding kind of stigma-based comments or feedback?
So I would say that I realized later in life that I had that, and especially the word jokes. So there were comments, and usually from very close friends. The classic comment on, you're in a, I don't know, in a birthday party and they're like cutting the cake, and somebody will do the joke like, oh, Santiago cannot have one because if not, he will die, And I mean, I have these memories of like, me laughing or, saying, yeah, sure. But then I was like, why I didn't stand up and say, hey, what are you saying? This makes no sense. So I guess that there was a little bit of, internalized stigma in terms of, maybe I thought that was my fault or, why I deserved that comment and was not something that was, I was not conscious about it till late, many years after, but I think that has like a residual element that, builds inside you. And you just think that it's fine, but actually it's not fine. But
it's not funny. Like, get a new
No.
joke. Jokes are supposed to be funny. This one isn't. It's just lazy. At this point, it's lazy.
Yeah, but they don't know that, right? Like, so,
Mhm.
and I think sometimes it puts us in a weird position to have to say that. And, sometimes I think too, we take the comfortable route versus uncomfortable, where we're like, we can just laugh and move on.
Or you're sharp and you open the conversation and like, why, what you saying?
Right.
Yeah. I would say in the rest of areas, I have been quite lucky in terms of, my family was always very supportive. In the workplace, I never had any problems. Of course, I had somebody like, watching you when you're injecting in public and these sort of things. But I always have been quite talkative about it. So I always will explain and things like that. I remember once where I was injecting in public in a restaurant, actually, and there was a child, and the child was watching me. And that was a very interesting situation because how you explain, to the mother that the child is in some, you never know exactly which sort of movies have seen the child.
Right.
If you're like 6, 7 years old, I don't know. Well, maybe
It's
later.
like you have the opportunity to be the first introduction to that child, or maybe.
Yeah.
Diabetes.
That's a
Yeah.
very positive way of seeing it, Rob. Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
I always tell them I'm a robot, and they really like that. That's usually what I say. I'm just like, I'm a
Yeah.
robot. I'm like a cyborg, like from Teen Titans, like that. And then they're like, what? And I'm like, I'm a mechanical part. Like, so that's usually what I tell kids because I think that it's hilarious. I love that we're here though, because as we wrap the episode, there's something that we have to talk about. We cannot skip over. We must let Santiago speak on this.
It's coming.
In
it's coming.
December,
Yeah.
Santiago became a dad, which might surprise all of you because everyone's always surprised to find out how old he is. But I just want to touch a little bit, no, seriously, it's so funny. Keisha, I'm going to shout out Keisha here. She's like, girl, why didn't you tell me Santiago was so fine? I was like, what? Ew. But people always say that to me. They're just like, I just thought he was like, some 30-year-old kid like us. But actually, he's a grown-up. He's a father. And he had a baby in December. And
Also, I want to clarify: being 30 is grown up. If you're 30 and say you're not grown, like we gotta have a conversation.
Thank you, Rob. I like that comment. Yeah.
No, if I get married next year, I'm a child bride. No, I'm a child. Leave me alone. Anyways, the child had a real child. Santiago had a baby with his partner. Can I say your baby's name? Is that okay, Santiago?
Sorry, say that again.
Can I say your baby's name?
Yeah, it's called Tiago. Tiago.
His name's Tiago, which is so cute because it's like
I love
a
that
mini.
name.
But when I saw him, he'd been going through the process of his partner being pregnant, and then we've since spoken since she had the baby. And I just wanted to give him a quick moment to talk a little bit about his experience as a new dad with diabetes because, oh my God.
Well, hopefully my partner, she will not listen to this. So to be honest, I mean, having type 1 diabetes and being a dad, yeah, it's something that it took me a while to process the idea of, to be honest, because as you know, sometimes some days are not very smooth when you have diabetes. So I think there was an element of self-doubt about it. Having said that, the child is super healthy and is doing well. But to be completely honestly with you, I think there was a shift in changing my mind since I got the hybrid closed loop system last year. Last year. So I have been way more active and I have been kind of taking back the control, I guess, in many situations. And that allowed me to think that was doable. Of course, already happened that I'm changing a nappy and suddenly, the sensor starts beeping and you're like, oh God, all this pull around and my sensor, beeping or what I should do. But I mean, I don't know. It's just, you have to go
I
for
think
it.
you're
If it is
forgetting the
something
lack
that,
of, because last week when we talked, you were like, Eritrea, I don't sleep. And I was
well,
just like, "Man."
the lack of sleep is real, and that, as you know, the lack of sleep impacts the blood sugar levels. So I mean, that's something that we really need to think about it and to see how to manage. It's definitely also, I mean, the diet or many things, that the first weeks probably they're difficult to stick to a routine, and in my case, diabetes and a routine is like a must to cope with many things. But yeah, I mean, definitely an extra layer. But I mean, we're super
We just
happy,
always hear
and
from,
I think we'll
I
have
just
to
feel
do
like
it.
when you get on baby, I always hear like, oh, like the post care of the mom and the post care of the mom, and the mom is the most important. I want to make sure our listeners understand, not taking the shine away from your partner. Shout out Haley, she's amazing. But I do wonder, how do you support self with diabetes and partner and baby and do job and man build house and build fire and provide? You know what I mean? So
Go out and hunt. Yeah.
yeah.
I think in my case, I'm very lucky in terms that, this is a very, I think communication is key in a relationship. And we had a very open conversation, like before having a child, saying, hey, I do like the idea, but are you aware that, I have diabetes? And there are some days that if I go low and, maybe I'm 2 hours completely off, this doesn't mean that I want to help, but sometimes I come first because, if I'm not okay, I will not be able to help. I will not be able to supporting you, or, even the classic situation where, you're preparing breakfast and maybe she's hungry, but it's like, hey, I already injected my insulin. Sorry, I have to do it before you. I'm not rude. It's just, this is the way.
Mhm.
So, I think, yeah, it's that. Maybe in another interview you can make these questions to her and what she said.
Honestly, I would love that. Like how to, and I may have to do that down the line of like interviewing diabetes, like diabetic dads. Like what excuses have your diabetic partner used while they're to get out of changing a diaper or something like that?
Many, for sure. We all have, yeah.
I like that. We won't tell Haley that. We'll keep that all. That'll be our diabetes secret, that that a hypo can get you out of a diaper change every now and then.
It's more like using diabetes as a, how you say in English, like the wingman. Like,
Play it. I just call it the diabetes card. I'm like, I'm playing the diabetes card today. Here you go. That's the ace in the hole.
yeah.
Can I tell you guys a secret?
Please.
Rob, I rarely use the diabetes card. Like I think I've used it like twice in my life.
Really? Why?
I know. I don't know. I'm working on it. I just I try to be as prepared as possible, but I think I remember the first time I took myself out of a meeting was in 2019, and it was because I had my my insulin had like crystallized in the tubing, and so I hadn't been getting insulin for maybe like 8 hours, and my blood sugar wouldn't come down. I had been, in the 300s like for hours and hours, and I was like feeling terrible. I almost went to the hospital because I had ketones, but I remember like I stepped up in the middle of the meeting. I was like, I have to leave, guys. I'm sorry. I got to take care of my diabetes. So that was like one of the first times I ever played that card. And that was only like 4 years ago. So I'm still learning.
Wow.
I haven't done it that many times, but the last time I did it, I cried. It was awful. I was like in a work meeting and my blood sugar was low and been low for a while. And I was like, had started sobbing to myself because I am a baby, but I thought I was muted and I wasn't muted. I was like,
That's a low brain with the mute button. I don't know though. I think like to your point though, Trey, like other people around me were really afraid because I never do that. So they're like, oh my God, what's happening? And so I think like it helps to play the card like a few times just to get people comfortable with the idea that even though you're playing it, you're still okay. So I don't know. I'm learning. I'm learning. Just
make
new
the
stuff.
most of it. Yeah. And I think also because if not, in my experience is that people with diabetes, sometimes we're very good actors.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that you're not going low. You're going low, but you're there and, I'm still fine.
It's
I'm
fine.
still fine. I'm
Everything's
still fine.
fine.
I'm still fine. A little bit more. But then you just cry.
Yeah, and it's like you don't want, for me, I identify with that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm still having these issues. You're just not noticing it. I'm dealing with it either in the background or popping gummy bears in the middle of a call so you don't see me.
Totally.
Yeah.
The thing about me, very much. We must all suffer with me. You must all know I am suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
Well, Santiago, first of all, I just want to thank you for making time for us today. I know as a new
Thanks
dad
to you.
and, being overseas as well, like making the time work, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective. This is amazing. We'll definitely have you back and maybe use you as like a co-host for like the diabetes dad work. Maybe we'll figure that out. But
Yeah.
this was really cool, and it's lovely to meet you face to face after many years of seeing your work online,
Likewise,
and
Ru.
looking forward to continuing to connect. And hopefully, I don't know if you're going to be at any of the European events this year, but I will be in Florence later in March for ATTD. So if you're going to be there, maybe I will see you. But if not, I look forward to the first time that we can cross paths.
That would be great. I'm afraid that I'm not going to Florence, but yeah, I'm sure next time it will be great to meet you. And
Likewise.
yeah, guys, thank you very much for having me.
We'll tag your accounts as well in the show notes, just to make sure, if our listeners aren't already aware of you, that they can find your work. And thank you for being an awesome example for people with diabetes everywhere.
Thank you very much.